This last little while I've been just reflecting on Anatta. Of course, I've been doing that for the last 40-odd years, but that's the and it's such a essential part of the Buddha's insight, and it's important to keep reflecting on it, because it goes against the grain of how we tend to think, tend to relate to the world around us and to ourselves. So to be consciously bringing that contemplation, reflection of not self is really critical to our progress on the path. One of the suttas that the Buddha is very direct. This is the Buddha saying that this Dhamma is for one who knows and sees, and the ending of suffering is only for one who knows and sees. And one who knows and sees what? And sees the arising, seeing the form, aggregate, seeing its arising, seeing its passing away, seeing feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Seeing their arising, seeing their passing away. So that's sort of seeing that, knowing and seeing these things that we identify as self, identify as I and me and mine, and because that that is essentially that is all we take as a sense of self, a sense of our essence, of our kind of inner core, inner being. This is who I am. This is me. This is what I am. Is just some aspect of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, or consciousness, and it's that identification that is the problem. It's like in our morning chanting that we do every day. So that there's 5 focuses of identity, our dukkha, and that's it. Of course, they're also not self, but these are what we focus on as our identity. This is what I identify with, and this is where we create our delusions around. So the being able to recognize the focal point for what we call self and attaching to self, and where we can let go of it, and just because it's letting go of the identification and the attachment that is the key. Being able to reflect on that, investigate around that. Because it isn't as if, say, like, anatta is some kind of experience, in the sense of, the anatta experience, or when I experience anatta, it'll be like this. But it's there's just sort of a recognition of this is not what I thought it was going to be, or not what I assumed it to be. The sense of self is somewhat, it's ephemeral, but it's a bit more clear. And but then it's that sense of recognizing, this is not it. What I assumed to be it is really not it. And it's like it's like having something that is say maybe problematic, toxic, and then realize, and what comes to mind is like when we were preparing to take the house down, and before we could get the house down, then we had to have it inspected for asbestos, and so it has this thing of asbestos, and then you get somebody to come in, and you hire them, and they take a look and inspect everything, and then they look for the asbestos, and then in the same way, like with anatta, it's like anatta, sort of without self or not self. So then our house was an asbestos. It wasn't asbestos. It didn't have any. So then we could continue to work on it. So that similarly with that sense of not self. It's not as if, say, it's like the asbestos quality was actually already there. And similarly with anatta, it's already there. We just tend to hone in on the aspects of atta, create problems around, identify with it, get caught up with it. So in that sense, it's just learning how to investigate and see what we tend to take as self, realizing, well, that's not it. That's not really substantial. That's not really an essence, because it keeps changing. It's and same like with the just these aspects of our and the Buddha gives many different templates for investigation. They say the 5 khandhas, or the 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates of clinging, are just one of the templates. But it's a really important one, because it tends to be around our experience of what we assume to be our function: body, feeling, perception, mental formations, emotions, thoughts, consciousness. So we assume these into this position of being self, or I, or me, or mine, and that's why it's so important to keep reflecting and say, well, that's not it. It's anatta, and it's not a disappointment. In the same way as finding that our house was asbestos, that was not a disappointment. That was a great relief. So it's with the experience of anatta. It's like a relief that we don't have to carry that burden of anatta and identification. So this willingness to investigate and pay attention to this experience of our human condition and what is it and how do we create suffering, create problems, create a burden. And that's like one of the chants that we do in our new chanting book, is these 5 aggregates of clinging, these 5 khandhas are a burden, and we're the beasts of burden that carry this around. So that's just being able to see that as problematic, rather than trying to rationalize or justify or continue to be swept up, because it's so ephemeral in the sense that, I mean, just our of course, we've got something that we call I or me or mine, myself, and you think it's substantial, but I mean, it's like a river, such and such a river, and you think, well, what's the river? And of course, it's a conglomeration of qualities that's constantly changing, and it's really not. It's not a substantial thing. Say like our Tom Kai Creek here, which is part of the Russian River, the headwaters of the Russian River. I mean, this is, especially when it's the headwaters, it's changing all through the year, and through every year it keeps changing. It's all different. It's banks. It's the flow of water and what is in it. And it's got a name for it, but the name isn't the totality. It's just a name. So same with the sense of self. It's just there's these aspects of experience, and we have to learn how to pay attention to those aspects of experience and not to let it turn into something that we burden ourselves with, torment ourselves with, create attachments and confusion around. That's why with say like that seeing of anatta, the sense of relief is one of experiencing things through a lens of humility and clarity. This isn't not having to fix oneself in any particular way. The incredible spaciousness arises from that. Just recognize, as I say, this changing nature of the body, of the feelings, and how they interact with each other. It isn't as if there's body and there's no feeling to it, or there's body and there's no perception or memory or emotion around it. It's like if you take, it's like using your body, and if you say make an effort to smile, or it'll change your mood if you keep doing that, or if you set your face in a grim frown and you keep doing that, it'll set a mood. It has that effect. So that these are it is body, but it does have an effect. It does, and it isn't as if it's just body independent of mind and emotion. So that sort of learning how these things interact, but not creating an identity. And this is why the Buddha's project is he keeps focusing on the experience of dukkha and cessation of dukkha, suffering, cessation of suffering. That unsatisfactory quality and its alleviation. It's bringing it to an end. Because so often the human beings tend to focus whether and they did it, and they've done it in Buddhism as well. I mean, you think for in the sense of what am I? What really am I? What am and so they're trying to define what am I, and what am I as a human being, and the Buddha never asked that question. Commentarial tradition tends to sort of focus, you're say the conglomeration of these five khandhas, or you are these five khandhas, or you are, but the Buddha didn't really approach it from that point. He said, there are these five khandhas. They're a good tool for investigating experience, but you want to keep bringing it back to suffering and ending of suffering, as opposed to trying to prop up a definition of who you think, I am this, I am that. And of course, in a theocentric religion, then it gets even more, fantastical of what people think they are. But so that's not it's important to recognize that the Buddha is really trying to give us the tools to understand the human condition and how to free ourselves within that. So that's where the Buddha gives this lovely image of, oh, that I were free from suffering, and he says, well, it's like a hen who has maybe 8 or 10 or 12 little eggs, and may my little eggs turn into little chicks and be happy and free, but the hen doesn't sit on the nest, wanders around doing this, doing that, keeping busy, checking Facebook account, and those eggs don't hatch because the right conditions didn't happen. So in the same way, they say, "Oh, may I be." If one wishes, "Oh, may I be free from suffering," but doesn't put in the factors of the practice and cultivation of four foundations of mindfulness, putting forth, say, the four right efforts, the factors of awakening, the application of the spiritual powers, the Eightfold Path. It doesn't work. But then, if one has that wish, and the Buddha actually says, whether one has that wish or doesn't have that wish, if one puts one's attention onto those qualities of the practice and Dhamma practice, then one reaches the goal. And then in the same way of the hen who is whether she has the wish, may my chicks hatch safely, healthily, or not, as long as she keeps them warm, sits on, attends to them, keeps them safe, they're going to hatch. Because the conditions are right. And so for ourselves, and that's on a certain level, that is a kind of a manifestation of this anatta principle, in that it isn't as if it's sort of a self that is having to do this. It's like according with the proper conditions, the circumstances change in a beneficial way or not. And so and of course the beneficial way that we are wanting things to change is may I experience freedom from suffering, may I experience peace, may I experience well-being, may I experience happiness. Because it's just natural to want to experience that. So, as we practice, one is that investigation of the five khandhas are a very good tool to be investigating and seeing how we attach, how we create a sense of self, how we can see that more clearly in its true nature, and how we can release and relinquish that identification with those aspects of experience. But it's also approaching it with the practice, because it's these same five khandhas that have to implement the practice. We have to implement the path, and exercising that cultivation of mindfulness and discernment, and so countering that tendency, because there's that ignorance and craving, avidya and tanha, and we're kind of caught in this vortex, and it's essential to be able to see how those forces work and pull us in different ways, and habitually or keep us stuck in the habit of identification, so that we so that we keep repeating these cycles of suffering. But then it's that cultivation of this path of practice, and that cultivation of discernment and peace, that we're able to see that clearly and relinquish, and that because when if we're caught in those cycles of ignorance and craving, and we're suffering, the habit is to be like, I am suffering, and it's so strong to feel that sense. I am suffering. I'm the one who's suffering. I am a suffering being. I am, and it's just deeply ingrained. And that's why it's so important to be cultivating quite consciously a path that allows us to experience a sense of peace and happiness and well-being. So that certainly the foundations of generosity, of kindness, of virtue and integrity, those lay a very strong foundation of confidence, self-respect, well-being, stability, but then we have to keep putting our effort toward how to really settle the mind, to bring the mind, the heart, to a place of inner stability and steadiness and clarity and fundamentally happy. And that's where, say, the aspects of samadhi are so important. It gives us a break from that identification, I am suffering. And, we can go ahead and say, well, I am this happy, peaceful, concentrated, clear person. But it's easier to see through, especially if you're one cultivating the path, cultivating cultivating understanding, and studying the foundations of the teaching, so that because the Buddha just over and over and over again in so many ways, this aspect of this experience of our body, our mind, our perception of the world around us, perception of self, is fraught with that which is impermanent, inconstant, suffering, unsatisfactory, and not self. So that and it's that seeing more and more clearly, and from a place of clarity and well-being, that we're really willing to let go of that which sort of bedevils us and keeps us on edge and unsatisfied, discontent. So that exploring more and more deeply, what is it that helps to lead us to a place of clarity and well-being? And then that aspect of discernment is really being able to see what is it that the mind keeps tripping on, what does it keep getting stuck on, where does it keep identifying so that it feels limited. And that's what, there's not many suttas where the Buddha speaks of his own experience, and but where they are, they're really inspiring, because when the Buddha speaks of, because he speaks of the limitation of the 5 khandhas and the limitations of those dynamics of ignorance and desire. But then he also points to the fact that there is, one that he points to that, of course, he says over and over again, there is this cessation of suffering. But then pointing to his experience of it, is where he says there's consciousness which is without surface, without end, released awareness. And so, and the Buddha, when the Buddha is saying that his experience of the world around him is one with unrestricted awareness. And it's just this quality of unrestricted, unimpeded knowledge and clarity. So I think it's important to recognize that there is this possibility, and it isn't something that we can identify as self. It isn't sort of the Buddha saying, "Oh, this is what I got, and this is who I am," or this is my true self. There's this opportunity for release and unrestricted clarity that you don't have to make into anything other than freedom from suffering, and that it's a worthy goal to be reflecting on. So I'll leave it there for your reflection.